Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv. Wolok, my partner in crime as always, Vasili Gianarakos, my friend. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Yariv. It's Wednesday, so hump day. So we're getting there. In terms of the Flyers, interesting couple of games here with Tampa and the Sharks game for us to analyze post-trade deadline. So we're officially in the stretch drive to the playoffs. So excited to talk some hockey, my friend. How you
Hell
doing?
yeah, dude. Hell yeah. Yeah, we are. And like it's like a double-edged sword. It's like I wanted this feeling back, and now that we have it, like I'm staring at scoreboards like every night now, like on every team that's competing with us. I'm like, oh, thank God they lost. Oh, thank God they lost. It's like one of those. Um, but it's exciting. I mean, it's good to be part of the conversation again. All right, before we get started, just want to remind everybody, please like, subscribe, help us out with a share. That's also incredibly helpful. Hit the bell for notifications on YouTube and when these videos go live. Follow us on iTunes and on Spotify. Give us a rating on both if you're able to. Also, those are all tremendously helpful, all really helpful with the algorithm. You guys are doing an awesome job so far just tuning in. And we thank you so much. It's been amazing. But yeah, if you can do any of that stuff, it's also incredibly helpful. Also, shout out to our sponsors, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. You can get their cheesesteaks on DoorDash. And shout out to Public Summit Adjusters at 215-752-0560 for your adjustment needs. All right, let's get into it. So the big story that has kind of, it was all over the place, and one that, look, the Flyers are like one of the villains of the NHL. So if you're on our side, I feel a little bit justified. And, primarily what I've seen is people very confused and a little bit more on the Flyers side than anything here. But John Tortorella has been suspended 2 games. The Flyers lost a brutal 7-0 loss in a pretty critical game against the Tampa Bay Lightning, where just everything was going wrong. Within the first 10 minutes, the game almost felt decided. I personally was scratching my head. If I was John Tortorella, I would have been freaking out as well. I don't understand any of the calls that were made. And we were just talking about this a second ago. The Garrett Hathaway 10-minute misconduct for a shoulder shove. I don't know, was that happen like 30 times a game? I was just baffled. I was absolutely baffled with the reffing. Obviously throw it in there that one of the refs announced the penalty on Tampa Bay when he actually meant the Flyers. It was just a shit show. Like maybe he
Yeah.
was, I heard he was a young ref, kind of rookie ref. All right, whatever. Doesn't mean we have to pay for it. But at that time, John Tortorella refused to leave the bench for about like 90 seconds or so. It wasn't really that long. And then he kind of composed himself and left. But look, I'm not going to say he didn't deserve anything for not wanting to leave the bench. But a 2-game suspension, a $50,000 fine, that just seemed over the top, especially considering the context where, the calls were all head scratchers. Nobody knows what the hell's going on. The refs are making the wrong calls, into the microphone. It was just a shit show, reffing wise. So, like, maybe give the guy a little bit of grace for kind of losing his cool, considering you pretty much screwed him in the first 10 minutes of the game. And the Flyers did not play well in that game. Let's be very clear. It's
Yeah.
not the only thing that went wrong in that game, but I do think that it probably buried them where they didn't start well, and none of that helped. And losing the coach, I don't think any of that stuff helped. And it really just was kind of like the nail in the coffin in that game, unfortunately. The good side of that is Dan Hilferty, which, this is old school style, Ed Snyder style, comes out. He knows his city. Pretty much said that he'll pay any fine that was warranted towards Tortorella. Part of me suspects that maybe they increased the punishment because of that. Just being like, oh, well, if he's not going to pay the $50,000 fine, then we're just going to suspend him 2 games on top of that. So I don't know. Maybe that's just speculation. But what are your thoughts, Vasily, about the shit show we witnessed against Tampa Bay and Tortorella being suspended for a couple games?
Yeah, it's definitely some bad reffing by your officials. Wes McCauley, I believe, is the one who
Yeah.
makes the ejection for John Tortorella. And he's known to be a ref that, though, being somebody who has ref playoff games, important Stanley Cup games. Somebody who I don't think was in the right in this situation. I think like the calls deserve to be questioned from a John Tortorella from the Flyers coaching staff. I think the real breaking point was the Adder trip. It really wasn't a trip, and it was kind of a missed call, and it was pretty wishy-washy. So I can understand the anger from John Tortorella. Obviously, I think what gets him suspended the 2 games is the fact that he refuses to leave.
Yeah.
So, there's kind of at least a direct disobedience to what the refs are kind of assessing in
He shouldn't
game.
have done that.
Yeah, he shouldn't have done that. And that's pretty much what results in the 2 game suspension. So there you have it. Obviously, he gets suspended the 2 games. So he's already missed the Sharks game. Then he's going to miss the upcoming game here as well. I believe it's against the Leafs, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, he'll miss the game against the Leafs as well. And essentially, regarding Tortorella's suspension, there's some parameters. He must be out of the dressing room and end any and all contact with the team, including assistant coaches, by 4 p.m. for a 7 o'clock game. He can watch with the team personnel from above, but there's no in-game communication permitted. So essentially, he has to leave things in the hands of the assistant coaches. But obviously, I mean, Tortorella's been a coach for so many years. I'm sure they prepare adequately for what he's looking for from the team before these games. So there's not really much of a difference. And then obviously you have Bradshaw and Rocky Thompson who've had experience, manning benches before and have had experience manning the Flyers benches before at the end of last season with Tortorella kind of doing the eye in the sky type of, viewing experience to kind of analyze some players at the end of the year last season. So overall, I don't really agree with the suspension. Like, I don't think he should have gotten 2 games, but I understand that the league probably looks at the fact that he disobeyed what the refs were asking him to do. That plays the factor. And just because he's John Tortorella, right? He has that image about him. Um,
13 priors, I think, was the
yeah, he's had a lot of suspensions before and fines. So, um, I think that probably plays a factor into it, right? With like player discipline, they look at a player's previous history. So I'm sure they look at Tortorella's previous history. To be honest, the whole interaction to me was pretty hilarious. I thought it was really funny. He's kind of just telling the refs off, which, I mean, if you watch hockey
I
for
was
many years,
freaking
you
out, dude.
you see that happen. How many times a game do you see a coach telling the ref off? Like
It
multiple
just
times in a
it's
game.
it
So
I just feel like the league like didn't do themselves a favor. If they could explain what happened in that game
yeah,
publicly to some degree, I know they're not going to give us like a full walkthrough and
yeah,
a
yeah,
full detail, but like at least make some kind of announcement like okay, but like it was like horrible calls, screwed the Flyers over, and then screwed us again. You know what
yeah,
I mean? And it was just like, okay, if that's how it's gonna be, then we learned nothing from it, right? Like nobody learned any lessons from that. It was almost more just like, oh, okay, so you're just gonna be completely biased in this one.
yeah. I mean, it was definitely a
We're not the
bias
only
showing.
team this has happened to, and from what I understand, coaches have been
Yeah,
freaking out this year
Sheldon
in general.
Keefe.
Yeah,
Sheldon Keefe got suspended recently this season for the
yeah.
Leafs. So for a similar type of thing, obviously big freak out against the refs, gets ejected, so on and so forth. I
Like
mean, for the
there should
Flyers,
be some kind of punishment for losing it.
I expected a fine. I didn't really expect the
Right.
suspension. So
Right.
I think that's the extra step that happens because he doesn't leave the bench immediately as soon as they say, okay, get out of here. And the fact that he just has his prior rap sheet, if you so call it,
Yeah, yeah.
is pretty long. And he has an extensive history of doing things like this and blowing up. So I guess the NHL kind of wanted to make a bit of an example here
Sure.
with a veteran coach. I
I think
also
so
find it
too.
really I also find it really hilarious that it's the anniversary in this game of the 2004 Stanley Cup winning team for the Tampa Bay
Yeah.
Lightning that
Yeah.
Tortorella's the coach of. So like they have his former team up in the press box or up in some suite or whatever watching their Stanley Cup winning coach get ejected. And
10
like
minutes
apparently
in.
apparently yeah, and apparently all the players are like this is classic Torts.
Yeah.
So which it kind of is. So
Yeah.
that's a really funny wrinkle. I guess from the Flyers perspective though, like the penalty even though they got fucked on the penalties because that's what happened here, right? Um I would say the team needs to do a better job of not letting a situation like
100%.
this rattle them. Because if they at least kill off some of these penalties, because they do have a strong penalty kill, it's a completely different game if it's 2-0 versus 4-0, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's something to learn from, right? That we've seen calls go other teams' way in the past, even if it is a bad call, there's really nothing you can do to change it. So I think you just got to turn the page and focus on the penalty kill,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
and actually, I love that you brought that up because I'm not gonna lie, I miss Nick Seeler. Like I've been thinking about it consistently, and again, he's played really well. Like he hasn't
On the
just
PK.
he,
Yeah.
just defensively in general, he's just been so reliable. And on the PK, I agree. Like the team definitely doesn't play the PK to the same degree, and we saw that against the Sharks as well. Without him, the one thing this team is it's definitely lacking right now, and this is why, and we'll talk about Eric Johnson, but and this is why Eric Johnson was brought in here, is that defensive defenseman type. Without Risto here, without Sealer, I mean, you really don't have those type of guys, those like get in front of you, get in the way type of guys, who also have like a skill set and can skate. They have guys kind of filling that role right now, but it's not to the same degree that they had. And I like that even Tortorella mentioned Ristolainen as being a good defenseman, and how he's severely missed also. And like, yeah, Drysdale is like the fancy guy, but he's 21 years old. You know what I mean? Or he might be 22 right now, but he's a young guy. He's
Yeah.
not developed into like a PK stud at this
Risto's a
point.
more established defensive defenseman at
Like
this point, so it's a bigger loss there, right?
yeah, those are two huge losses, and what we do have an update on them coming later in the show,
But
on
yeah, I look at
Drysdale and Risto,
Wheeler
but
or not Wheeler. I look at a Sealer and Walker. I combine their names there, but
yeah.
look at Sealer and Walker, and like you're effectively losing your 5-on-5 pair. That's been one of your best this
And
season
Walker
from the
helps with
defense.
the aggression on the PK,
Yeah,
the
exactly.
conversion to offense.
And you're losing your penalty killing pairing, right? And we're kind of seeing the penalty kill, I think, suffer the last two games with them both out of the
Yeah,
lineup here. So
100%. And again, when I talked about the downside of trading Walker, this was kind of it. I
you're
don't think
getting
it's a
worse for
yeah.
the now anyway.
Yeah, and look, that's okay because the return for Walker was good. And that's what we've been saying on this podcast from day one. I wouldn't have been if it was just a second round pick, I wouldn't have been very happy. I'll be honest with you guys. The fact that it was at least a late first round pick, it's not a guarantee, but it's pretty high percentage you're going to get an NHL caliber player and up. It's no guarantee that you're going to get a Konechny. It's more of a guarantee to get a guy like Scott Lawton, but at least you know that it's a valuable chip or potentially a trade chip, help you move up in the draft. Like that's the bare minimum of what I wanted for Walker. Otherwise, in my opinion, you just ride it out. Otherwise, you disrupt your team, which we see right now. But having said that, the Flyers had the rebound. They did go up against the Sharks. They had another game where penalties were a problem, discipline was a problem. 5-on-5, they completely dominated the game. Special teams wise, the PK suffered a little bit. Even I would say majorly in comparison to how they've been doing, just because they gave up 2 goals on the penalty kill.
Yeah, on
Just
5 chances. Yeah.
yeah, which is like unlike them. They just had like some breakdowns. They had some breakdown moments. They had moments where they were just stuck in their own zone. So that was a little bit brutal to watch at times, especially because especially this game is so important to win against the Sharks because it's by far the easiest game in the upcoming schedule. And if you lose that one, it's not the end of the world, but it's like that's the give me one,
Yeah.
right? That's the one that should be a surefire win.
That's the
We're all
guaranteed points type
right.
of game here. So
Yeah. So let's just do some quick thoughts on the Sharks game. I mean, overall, awesome to see some stuff. We have like standout performances. I do want to talk about individual players, but
Yep.
um, yeah, it's just a big win overall. I think they still won. Um, without the special teams being kind of that X factor, this should have been like a 3-0 game for the Flyers.
Yeah, my opinion really is the Flyers did start off with some energy. But then once the Sharks kind of got some of those power play chances and then Zadina gets that power play goal, I did think that the Sharks had a lot more chances to end the first period and in the second period. Um, and then really the Flyers for me kind of take control to end the second, like the final eight
Yeah,
minutes. They really push the envelope. They're unable to score and they put on a lot of shots on Corona. And then in the third period, they continue to really just up the
they
shot
took
volume.
over in the first half of the first, which was
Yeah,
or the
first,
third.
yeah, exactly. So first half of the third, they really take over, and then once Tippett scores that goal, it's pretty much smooth sailing for them. They continue to create chances, continue to defend well, and not really allow the Sharks to get any high danger chances on their end. One thing to point out is Farabee gets a goal for the first time in 11 games. So it's good to see him kind of get off the schneid, and they're going to need him obviously down
Hmm.
the stretch run here to kind of up his production a bit. Big game from Morgan Frost. I thought he was one of the Flyers' best forwards. He was very noticeable. He had 2 points in this one. Travis Konechny also very noticeable in this game. He has
Yeah, two
2 points
assists.
as well,
Yep.
and Cam York also with 2 assists. So that's three Flyers in York, Frost, and Konechny that get 2 assists. And I thought Samuel Urson, like in the times where the Flyers did have some dips and San Jose was, creating some scoring opportunities, he was making a lot of big saves at key moments, right? Like that save on Barabanov in the third. That left like toe pad save, that was a huge one. If that goes in, I think the complexion of the game probably changes a lot. And then obviously, I think the disappointing factor for the Flyers is just the penalty kill, right? Like to see it go 2 for 5 against a power play in the Sharks that's I believe second last in the league. That's not really ideal. So I think we can kind of attribute that to maybe some of the new additions on the penalty kill and some of the subtractions on the back end, like we were talking about with missing a Sealer and Walker. But overall, the main thing is the Flyers get the 2 points because without them getting the 2 points here and the stretch coming up, where they're playing, playoff teams in the next 7 games, this is just a critical 2 points for the
They're
Flyers.
they're playing all Stanley Cup contenders to some
Yeah.
to some degree.
What did you think
Uh,
about the game here, Yariv?
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are pretty similar. I like the goal, like the people who scored. I thought was all crucial, just because we've been so reliant on that third line, and I do want to talk about that because these like numbering lines things kind of annoying to me. But obviously the Paling line, Paling, Cates, and Hathaway have been very, very good at their role, and they've kind of been carrying this team for the past few games, which is kind of weird to think about. But so it's nice to see the other guys getting going. Um, I just thought it was a very important win. I just wanted them to win. I didn't care if they won with style or whatever. They still pummeled them with shots. They were giving up on shots for opting for passes early, which again, when this team does that, you can almost it's like a calculation. When you see
Yeah.
the Flyers overpass, they are not playing their best hockey. Towards the third, especially in the beginning of the third, they were just shooting from everywhere, and you could see that the shot numbers started spiking, and all of a sudden they started dominating the game. That's really what San Jose was doing to the Flyers. Is any opportunity they were around the net, they were shooting. There was no clutching. They would just shoot. Excuse me. They have nothing to lose. So I think that type of game is key. And it's a big problem I have with the power play. We'll talk about a little bit about that. So you mentioned newcomers. Eric Johnson, I thought actually had a pretty good game. Especially in the third period. I thought, he stood up, he made some really nice
He
he
had a
had
big
that
defensive play. Yeah.
yeah, that play from his stomach, which was a risky play, but he pulled it off at the same time. So you got to give him credit there. And it was kind of like this kind of mad play that was just completely nullified by what he did. And it was hard to judge him in that first game just because the team played like dog shit. So like, how do you? I always say that, right? How do you judge one guy when the entire team is
Yeah,
playing
exactly.
underperformance? So just to see that he fit in nicely, it's kind of what I was expecting, and I actually expect him to continue to get better. The more time, they spend together. So to me, I thought it was a positive, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. And it's going to be interesting as they get healthy, if they get healthy on the back end. Is it going to be Mark Stahl? Is it going to be Eric Johnson? And I'm just kind of curious to see how they balance that out.
Yeah, for Johnson too, I mean, he did state that like his best years are behind him. He expects to kind of be a depth piece here, which is true. Like the Flyers are going to try to use him in more of a third pairing role. But I think you could definitely tell at least one detriment to moving a guy like Walker and adding a guy like Johnson is at least with Johnson, he has some defensive acumen, some defensive prowess in terms of like the shot blocking. He can be reliable in his own end, but I think you do definitely see at the Flyers in terms of that transition game, that quick up type of offense. When you have a guy like Johnson in versus a guy like Walker, it's a little bit different. Where like Walker's really trying to push that play up ice, where Johnson's a little bit different. So I think that kind of maybe contributes to the PK as well, right? They're a little bit less aggressive with a guy like that out there. I did want to mention interesting stat from Alexander Appleyard. So it's 3 years of expected goals for on the PK. Johnson in the last 3 years a negative 1.440 expected goals for on the PK, and that has him as actually the worst PKing defenseman in the NHL over the last 3 years. So obviously not the greatest, but yeah, in this past game, actually, Adder was on the PK instead of Johnson, whereas Johnson was on the PK in his first game as a Flyer against Tampa. So maybe an adjustment that the team kind of recognized that just with him being a little slower, a little older in age, it's better to have an Adder out there who can be a little bit more aggressive. But
Yeah,
Johnson, I think so far, I mean, is fitting in well for what his role is going to be, right? Like
and
they
and
expect him to be a third pair guy. So
yeah, you mentioned Addard. I mean, I can't point to a single instance, especially in the last game, where I was disappointed in Addard. The only thing I want to see from Addard is more of his offensive production. But again, I'm, got to be patient. He's a young defenseman. He's going to go in there trying just to play good defense, which is exactly what he should be doing. But, he's got that big shot. I just want to see a little bit of that. That's like the only thing I
yeah,
really am waiting on from Addard is a little bit more of the offensive aggression. But I like that they feel confident enough to throw him on the PK. He's got really good size. The kid can move. So
yeah,
as
moves the
far as
pucks up pretty
yeah, like
quick.
can he play that Walker role? Eventually. I'm not gonna put that on him, but that's kind of what we need from him is somebody to help with those breakout passes, create some offensive production on the PK too, which we were very good at this year when healthy. So it's
Yeah, just
interesting.
just
Yeah,
to
go ahead.
add on Addard as well, it's another stat from Alex Appleyard to shout out to him. But even though he's only played a limited number of games, so far in 20 games played, his underlying numbers are fantastic. He has a 0.83 on 5 points per 60, uh, uh, 0.64 expected goals for, and his expected goals for of 0.64. It's actually the best of any D man who's played 15 plus games in the last 3 years. So obviously take that with a grain of salt. He's played a very limited amount of games in 20 games played, and he's probably had sheltered minutes in some of those games here, just being a young defenseman
Sure.
as he's kind of making his way in the NHL. But it's a great thing to kind of see him assimilate so easily, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't seem as though he looks out of place, which
Yeah.
is
Look,
positive.
we're not bringing him in here to play 20 minutes a night. We're bringing him in
Yeah.
here to play 14 to 16 minutes a night, right? So as long as you can be successful in that specific role at this point in time, that's what we need from you. So the other defenseman that you mentioned him already, we definitely need to talk about it. But Cam York played over 26 minutes, had two assists in the game. He now, for all the talk about how he's not an offensive defenseman, he has 9 goals and 16 assists on the year. Um, Again, I'd like to see more assist on that. I think a lot of that contributes to the fact that our power play stinks.
Yeah.
But I, have to say, I think Sanheim's a little bit banged up. Obviously, I think he was wearing a brace at one point, so he's not 100%. We know that. So they probably relied more on Cam York tonight or last night. And but it was, it's nice to see that he can step into that role. I still see him, maybe he's a number one at some point in his career, but he's definitely still a top pairing caliber defenseman if he's not fully evolved into that yet. But when you see hints of this stuff, it's like it's reassurance to know that he is going to be that guy who's going to be playing 22, 24 minutes a night. Hopefully he doesn't have to play 26. It's more of a consequence of the injuries. But everything I see from Cam York is that he's right on track to be that two-way guy who can rely on for 50 points a season, to be a plus player and to play against the best players in the world. And I think he's still on track to do that. And mind you, he did against San Jose. But it's not the first time we've seen these type of performances from Cam York. I think he next year I can only imagine where he's going to be. And like thinking about it, right now, he's going to be 23 going on 24 next year. 24 is really the age where like defensemen typically hit the NHL. I don't think that's where he's going to peak in his career, but I do expect another jump this offseason. I think tonight's game is a sign of probably what we're going to see more of next season.
Yeah, for York, I mean, he played a really good game last night. He's basically used as your number one defenseman, essentially, with um Sanheim being a little banged up after he had that little kind of twist of his knee in the Tampa Bay game. So that's definitely a positive that Sanheim was able to play because imagine, I mean, if he's out as well, this defense is just really injury ravaged. But
Sure. Yeah.
York, I think for with having 25 points and kind of the role he's played, he hasn't even played on the power play the whole season, right? There was a point where he was taken off as well. So he does at least get an assist on the power play in the game last night. So maybe some of that production begins. But what I will say for York that I'm really impressed about is just his willingness to block shots and put his body on the line. Like he has 3 block shots once again in yesterday's game. That ties Eric Johnson, who also had 3 block shots. So that just shows, a facet that Johnson's bringing too, right? Like he likes to block shots as well, which is crucial at this point of the season. But yeah, York actually he is amongst one of the or like amongst the shot block leaders, right? So if you look at shot block leaders of the NHL, he's 21st in the league, just behind Eric Goodbranson. So he actually is one of the fairly most consistent shot blockers. So that just kind of shows that
I
even
think
though
that's
he
been
was
going up too, right?
yeah, it has. He's been blocking shots a lot more often recently, but I do think that it's been a bit of a not a surprise because I think he's always been a solid defenseman in his own zone, but a lot of people thought of him as an offense only type of defender, right, when we drafted him, but that's just not the case. Like he's an
Right.
all-around defenseman.
Yep.
And I would argue at this point his defensive game might be even more advanced at the NHL level than his offensive game. Like I think there's still more room for him to grow offensively.
Yeah.
Likely he's going to hit 30
And
points this season, but I think he, like you said, Yariv, like for him to be in that 40, 50 point range every year as he kind of progresses and gets into his prime, I don't think that's out of the question at all. And what I look like or what I look at York as is I don't think he's ever going to be your bona fide number one, but he can definitely be a guy that's a top pairing D man, really, really good number two. And you need those guys obviously to
yeah.
to go far in the postseason and just have a good defensive makeup for your team.
And a
So
lot of time those guys get thrown in the number one role because I've said this over and over again, and Steve Cornianos didn't follow that, but I don't think that there are enough number one defensemen in the NHL to even go
yeah.
around. So most of the time you have number two defensemen playing number one roles. So, you know, like I don't think it would be that weird to see Cam York as the number one defenseman on this team for, a couple years, unless they can bring somebody in through free
Yeah.
agency or, draft somebody that somehow develops like that quickly, which
Well,
doesn't normally happen.
I'd argue like right now, do they have a bona fide number one? No, but it's like you're going with almost 2 number 2s to make up that top pair
Sure.
in York and
That
Sanheim. And just to correct my earlier stat, he's not 21st in blocks, he's 24th. So a little
okay.
lower, but same thing basically.
Top 25.
Yeah.
And he's still a young guy. And look, what every great defenseman has been for the majority of them is that they start off improving their D and then the offense flourishes from there.
Yeah.
Unless they're like kind of a pure offensive defenseman, like a Quinn Hughes, who's kind of gone the opposite way, where he came in,
Or Makar
made,
or something.
yeah, came in, made the NHL. Makar is like an anomaly, but Hughes more. I remember listening to I think I sent you this video that
Yeah.
Bruce Boudreau. There were people trying to convince him to make him a centerman.
Oh my
To
God, I
be
saw that, which is
yeah, which is
hilarious.
ridiculous. And he like refused to do that, and he just kind of believed in the kid that he would gain the defensive game, and that has obviously happened. And that's kind of typical, right? Is like you make the NHL because you have something about your game that sticks out that is above average. And then you kind of build on the other parts of your game where York is kind of was like even keeled in both and now is, developed his defensive game to be NHL level where we need him to be. Now the offensive game can develop too because he can be relied upon in all of these situations. So, you never know. Like nobody thought Duncan Keith was going to be a number one defenseman. He clearly ended up being not just a number one defenseman, but a Hall of Famer for all um, for all indications, just from the championships, the stats that came,
Yeah,
with it. So,
exactly.
the other player that we do want to talk about, newcomer Guryanov. So he was kind of elevated into a larger role, playing with Travis Konechny and Sean Couturier. Interesting move. I think most people expected him to kind of start in the bottom six. I don't know what the hell the line numbers are anymore. I don't think it really matters, to be honest with
Yeah,
you.
the minutes are really weird. We
Well,
gotta go over that as
yeah,
we
they
talk
they
about
kind of
this.
just fluctuate depending on who's hot that night, but there's also like depending on what position, like state the team is in, like and what situations that they're in. There really isn't a number one line on this team at this point. There isn't really even a number two or a three or a four.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I thought it was a nice opportunity for Guryanov. I noticed him more as the game went on, and he got power play time. Didn't notice him on the power play, especially he had a give and go um, with Tyson Forrester.
Yeah.
He had that nice shot along the half boards. I do want to talk about Rocky Thompson's comments on the power play, but first, what are your thoughts about Guryanov?
Yeah, I mean, like, I didn't really notice him to start the game, to be honest. I was trying to keep an eye out for him as he's playing with Couturier and Konechny, and I did see him out there with them for a couple of shifts. I noticed him and Konechny were trying to do some type of give and go play where Guryanov passes to Konechny behind the net, and then he shifted to the slot, and Konechny was trying to find him, but he never did. Like, I understand why they put a guy like Guryanov with those two because he's a skilled player. So, put a skilled player with your most skilled player in Konechny, and also another very highly skilled and highly intelligent player in Sean Couturier. And you hope, hey, maybe this could spark Guryanov's offensive game, and we kind of, have our diamond in the rough here, start scoring a little bit as we enter the stretch drive, and hopefully, secure a playoff spot. But yeah, like. He didn't play bad by any means necessary. I didn't really see any egregious defensive plays or anything, but nothing that totally jumped off the page. I mean, he did have that one, like you said, shot on the half boards that kind of either hit the post or hit the shoulder of Krona, but it's strange because in the box score he's not credited, I guess, with any shots on goal, so that must have hit the post. But it definitely is weird because he only gets 10 minutes and 53 seconds of time on ice, so that's the second lowest for any forward. Brink has the lowest in the last game of 9 minutes 51 seconds time on ice. Which is also a little interesting. And then you have his line mates. Couturier had 14:28. Konechny at 18:20. Like maybe that's to do with some of the penalty killing because there is five
Mhm.
power plays, so that takes away from some of the ice time. But yeah, the lines are just all over the place. And something else to mention that I thought was strange is like Morgan Frost. I mean, he's probably playing one of his best games, and he only gets 11 minutes
I
43
noted.
seconds
I
of
noticed
time
that.
on ice. Joel Farabee too, 13 minutes 42, and then Brink as well, 9:51. So there's some strange things with the ice time. And Guryanov, I mean. I didn't expect him to really have like 16, 17 minutes or anything like that. But I thought playing with Couturier connecting, maybe you get him in the 13, 14-minute range, but only 10 minutes for him. But I mean, a showing where he's, jumping out of the TV or jumping off the page or anything, but he was noticeable, and I could definitely see him, being a solid depth addition just in terms of scoring. Right, I think he could probably pot some goals down the stretch here that would be important for this team. That, I mean, right now, not to say they lack goal scoring ability, but some guys are certainly struggling to score. So
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Um, yeah, the ice time has definitely been strange. Sorry, got a phone call here. So the ice time has definitely been strange. But I kind of get it. At the same time, the Flyers are kind of going with hot hands. This has been the theme all year.
yeah,
And you look at Paling, he played 17 minutes. Hathaway over 15 and a half minutes. Lawton had 19 and a half minutes. Again, they're kind of going with guys who have been playing well of late. I think that will probably change as the season moves forward, but as long as you get the win, I don't care. So Rocky Thompson had an interesting comment in his post game where, he kind of just straight up said the power play stinks. I found it really interesting. I was listening to Jason Martinez today, and he kind of referenced that comment, and then you look at San Jose's power play is ranked 18th. Now they did lose some players, but their power play looks better than ours, and I don't see any elite players in that lineup. And this goes back to like what I was saying. Like, look, I hear you, Rocky. I do, and he mentioned, oh, we don't have shooters along the half boards that are that great. I don't buy any of that. I've
with
been
Tippett and
saying
Forster, I really don't buy it.
I just don't buy it at all. These and again, I'm not saying he made excuses, but if that's your diagnosis as to why the team is not scoring on the power play, that's not a good diagnosis.
That explains why it stinks so bad.
Yes.
Because you're
Uh,
not actively I mean, I'm sure they're actively looking for ways to improve it, but like try a different setup then. We still, like I said, I've been calling for this since the beginning of the season. We've still yet to see this. They are insistent on running that umbrella and trying to utilize the umbrella to create chances from the top. You have your PP quarterback either being a York or a Sanheim or whoever it's been this season, kind of facilitating to your left half board, your right half board. Well, if the power play stinks and it's not working, why don't you try to facilitate from behind the net instead, out into the slot, closer shots to the net? There's other things to try. They've yet to do that. So,
yeah.
right? Yeah, it's
Well,
baffling to me.
yeah. Again, with them, I think it's just look, when they play a 5-on-5, there's a certainty in their execution. I was just talking about when they pass up shots, you see that pattern hurts their 5-on-5 play. I think the power play is full of that. There are
Yeah.
so many times where I think this team overpasses on the power play. They don't keep it simple on the power play. That is my big again, when the Flyers had what top 3 power play unit in the league, who was the big shooter on that unit? I'll
Nobody. I
wait as
mean,
you try.
Giroux had a good shot, but he wasn't like an Ovechkin or like an elite shooter or anything.
Jake
But
Voracek scored what, maybe 20 goals a season.
yeah, more elite passing than anything. I just think, they were
They
more
play,
efficient in terms of setting it up, firstly,
yeah,
like getting into the zone, actually setting the power play up, but also just more efficient in terms of, okay, once we actually have it set up and we actually have created a chance, we're not going to hesitate to get the puck to the
they,
net, which I
they,
think this power play does. They hesitate a lot.
yeah. Well, they had a set of like 4 or 5 plays that they would rely on. They would execute on those plays and they would score. Like,
Yeah.
and this team, I don't know what the hell their plays are. They're different every goddamn game. They have to think on their feet. It's just not mechanical.
Yeah.
It's not instinctual based. It's overcomplicated. And look, maybe that's an issue of not being successful. But when I hear,
Lacking confidence. Yeah.
yeah, but when I hear like, oh, it's because we don't have any big shoot, I'm just like, that's not what
Yeah.
I see, dude. That's like
Well,
so
here's
far from what I see. If anything,
here's
we don't have a big shooter on
um
the point.
here's basically the quote from him. So he was asked about the struggles of the power play and then asked why he gave Dennis Guryanov a shot in the power play. And essentially the exact quote is, well, our power play stinks, and he was a good power play guy at one point in his career. It's
Yeah.
not going to hurt our power play putting them there because it's no good anyway. So I respect the honesty, at least he's
Yeah, no,
honest about it.
that didn't bother me.
And I respect the fact that, okay, you're right. Why not give Gurianov a shot? Because the power play does stink. And he has been good on the pass in the power play. Like he showed when he was in Dallas, he could score on the power play. He has a really nice one-time shot. So I could understand putting him there. But to just say that, oh, our power play stinks, we don't have the shooters. I mean, I just think that's negligence in the sense that, okay, you don't have the shooters. First of all, you have Owen Tippett, who I believe leads the league in shots or is very close. Has a high velocity shot. Same with Tyson Forster, also very high velocity shot. Why aren't you setting these guys up for one timers or trying to kind of um, center your power play around them? It's not like, I would argue a few years ago with Claude Giroux and Jake Voracek, they actually had less shooters than they do now.
That's what I'm saying.
So
That's
it's
why I was
just,
like, I hear that. I'm like, yeah, no, dude. I was like, that's not it. I was like, that's not. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills because like, just simplify your power play. Your
yeah,
penalty kill is
get the
simple.
puck to the net.
Yeah. Like, what are you trying to like? All like even the give and go with Gurianov that Forrester had. I liked what they were doing, but I was like, do they know what they're doing
It
next?
seems like more of a 5-on-5 play versus a
Right.
power play
They're
setup. Yeah.
they're like kind of, they're like winging it. You're like, oh, this guy might be over. It's like they shouldn't be winging it on the power play. I said it so many times. Pass, pass, shoot. That should be the theme of the power play. 1, 2, shoot. Guy in front. Like I just don't feel like it's rocket science. And I feel like, and again, I'm not gonna shit on Rocky Thompson. It's not his only job to do the power play, despite what everybody thinks. And the offense has done well this year, right? They're not out of this world, but they've done well, especially at 5-on-5. So it's not the only thing he's doing. But I don't see the adjustment to the power play that simplifies it. That just gets
Yeah.
again. What is the hesitation of simplifying the power play? Like I don't get. Maybe look. I'm not a coach. I don't know hockey as well as any of
Well,
the
I
coaches.
I'd imagine. I mean, they're probably trying to preach to these guys to shoot, but when you're out there on the ice, it's easier said than done because the player
Of
always
course.
thinking, okay, this guy's in my shot lane. If I shoot it, it's going to get blocked. So then they try to overpass a bit. I just think at this point they haven't figured the power play out all season. It's probably not going to get
No,
figured out,
I've
unfortunately.
given up on it getting better this season at this point. Just you hope that the playoffs kind of resets it a little bit. It's
Yeah.
a lot of times special teams kind of just start at neutral and then you
It'll be
never.
interesting because I think the penalty kill being so good was kind of masking the power play problems a bit. But now with the penalty killing dipping a little, they might need the power play to step up a bit here. They did score a power play goal against San Jose. I mean, it's not really huge credit. San Jose is really bad, but at least maybe that's something to build on. So
Yeah. So the other thing is I noticed like people posting lines and Lawton's number one center, and then they're doing like Paling's number two center, and it's like, okay, like I get it, I understand why people are doing that, but like, does anybody actually think that Frost, Farabee, and Brink is a fourth line center on this team? I think people have to get more accustomed to the fact that numbering these lines, especially right now, is irrelevant. This team is going for a four-line attack. Like
yeah,
that is the way this team is built. They're not built top heavy. They are built through depth, right? They lack because they are not developed. They lack that top six that just drives the game every game. They don't have that type of team. So like, yeah, right now the Paling line has played fantastic. They deserve more ice time. You can call them the number two line, but they're not. They're the fourth line on the team.
yeah.
That's what they are. That's the role they're even playing. They're giving them extra time on top of their actual role because they're having success, as you should. And that's what I really like about
Ride the
this
hot
coaching
hand,
staff.
right?
Yeah, I like that they do that.
They
Keep everybody
identify it.
hungry. Yeah, and they keep everybody hungry that way. If you're not producing, you're gonna lose some minutes. You're not gonna just keep like that was kind of the problem with like watching Kevin Hayes play, right? Like I don't hate Kevin Hayes, but if anybody thought he played well in the season that he got chosen for the All-Star season, he didn't. He drove me
He did to
nuts to watch.
start, and then he dropped off completely, right?
Yeah, but it's like he just didn't have the hustle. Like he was never worried about losing ice time. Like all that kind of I felt all that. And he didn't respond well to losing ice time either. He didn't change his game or ratchet up his
Yeah,
intensity.
no.
He didn't do any of that, And that's not the culture that we want here. We want the next man up attitude. It's what's allowed us to sustain the injuries we've had and the
Yeah,
issues.
this creates a lot of internal competition, right? Because like you're
Yeah.
saying, if you're a guy getting, demoted to that de facto fourth line or not getting a lot of minutes, let's say, you're going to think to yourself, well, hey, I deserve to play more, so I'm going to try to play better. And it's definitely a motivational tactic.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I mentioned before, I do still find it really strange that like you have Frost 1143, Farabee 1342, Brink 951. Like Frost, for me, I think that might have been one of his most noticeable games
That
all
line
season.
scored two of the team's three
Goals,
goals.
yeah, exactly. So it's really strange, but maybe, I think for sure the penalties definitely played a factor in those guys getting limited ice time just because
Yeah,
none of them play on the PK. Farabee used to be a PK guy, but he just has not been this season, just with the number of
sure.
penalty
The amount of
killing
guys.
forwards they
Yeah.
have. But I do think after a game like that, like maybe that's motivation, right? Where like they see that, hey, like, we're kind of not getting the ice time we deserve. They played really well. I would expect next game that line to get a lot more ice time, just based on how they performed.
Against Toronto, I see it almost as an inevitability because
Yeah.
Toronto is going to
They play
score
a
goals
fast game,
and they're
and you're
going to
going to
score
need this
goals.
line.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they killed us last time we played against them. So, um, we got we're gonna need that line to do well. Maybe the lines might not even be the same next
Yeah.
game.
And then
I wouldn't even be surprised.
something else to mention, and this is an interesting one. It's a tweet from Bill Meltzer, so shout out to Bill, friend of the
Yeah,
show. Dating back to December 9th, 2022, Owen Tippett and Morgan Frost have the identical points per game average, 2 points per three games. So I just thought that was really interesting to mention. But yeah, so in 73, um, so since December 9th, Frost has 73 points, or December 9th, 2022, Frost has 73 points, which is a 0.66 point per game average. And since December 9th, 2022 as well, Tippett has 77 points, and that's once again a 0.66 points per game average. Obviously, Frost, I think, with the scratches, a little less games played. So that's why it's the same kind of average, but it kind of shows it's really funny, the tale of two tapes, right? Like you don't see anybody kind of yelling for Owen Tippett to be traded or Owen Tippett to be moved. He gets that, long-term extension for 8 years. Where Frost kind of the different narrative where, everybody's opinion of him is all over the place. But he has the exact same points per games played as Tippett does. So it kind of just shows his
yeah.
value, and his production is very, very similar actually to
Yeah,
Tippett.
I think the treatment of Frost is definitely unfair. Look, I brought up trading him. I also said now that Cutter Gauthier is out of the system,
I
there's
brought up trading him as well. I thought he would
yeah,
get moved too,
yeah,
but
because of the roles. And
yeah,
I thought there were going to
exactly.
be other guys who were going to take that role in the near future. At this point, there is not a single center in this organization who does what Frost does.
That's his skill set.
He's still young. People are kind of over the top with the hate on Frost. It's definitely not warranted to the extent that he's gotten it. He has been inconsistent at times because, to that nice point per game streak, he just had time where he dries up, but so does Tippett. I think people give a little more grace because it's more normal for a goal scorer to not put up as many goals
Yeah,
periodically as far as like a playmaker, which is what Frost is, to like constantly set up plays. But at the same time, they're young players. He is developing a player. Look, he doesn't look to be developing a number one center. He's a late first round pick. If he turns into
yeah.
be a second line center, it's a
That's
humongous
really good
win.
value. Yeah.
Yes, fantastic value for a late first round pick. So like I think that shit needs to stop. And I think people just let Frost do his thing, let the coaching staff push him as so. I heard, and this was like Charlie O'Connor brought this up, where he's like, oh, maybe because Torts is not on the ice, he had his best game. I don't think he had his best game. I think Frost has had several games
Yeah.
with Torts on the bench. So like I don't agree with that. Maybe he was playing more
Well,
at ease. It's possible, but
yeah.
I don't see that.
That game after they had that little meeting, right? He scores the goal right
Yeah,
after that game. Like I think that was one of his best games. And also, I mean, if you look at it, the coaching staff didn't seem to think so because he played only 11 minutes and 43 seconds. So like he contributed and he played well, but it's not like he got a ton of ice time or anything. So it's really interesting for Frost that even though he continues to play well, like there is a level I think of disrespect from the fans in terms of what he can bring. And I think he does get overlooked a little bit in terms of like what the other players are bringing too. But he really, at least for the role he's been asked to play this season, and when he's actually been in the lineup, I think he's done a good job. So
Yeah, I think so too. I think I mean I stopped talking about trading him because I see no replacement for him. And
yeah,
when I don't see a
Bef
replacement for for the guy, I'm like,
exactly.
well,
And
trade him for what?
beforehand, I mean, my opinion on him getting traded earlier in the season, I said, hey, like the writing's on the wall, he's probably going to get moved. And the reason I thought that is because there was a stretch where there's 10, 12 games, the guy's just not playing. So
Yeah.
when you look at it that way, you're like, hey, you're not playing this guy at all, then, something has to give, right? Like he's going to
Yeah.
get frustrated. But it's definitely good that it didn't turn out that way because they're going to need him with just the lack of center depth that they have right now.
And it's also easier to trade a guy who's doing well,
Yeah,
even if he's
that
getting
too.
limited ice time. Because then a team could think, well, he only played 11 and a half
And
minutes
look how well
and
he's
he had a
doing.
goal and an
Yeah.
assist. What can we do if we give him 15 minutes or whatever?
Yeah.
Look at what the middle stat trade for Byram. And I'll be honest with you, I would take Byram over middle stat any day of the week.
Yeah, me as well.
So, again, you want Frost to do well. You want all of your players to do well, even if you're going to trade them. Like
Yeah,
look at the
exactly.
Sean Walker situation.
You don't want to have low value for some of
Yes,
your
you
players
want
because you're gonna.
peak value.
Yeah, exactly. You
You
don't want to
can.
trade them at a loss. So
Yeah,
if you
it's
do, but
it's bad leverage. Look at Johansson, the burden he became for Colorado. If he was, let's say he was on a 40-point pace, or sorry, say he was at 40 points. Let's say he had 20 goals on the season. Trading
yeah,
him would have been a lot easier for them if they had to get rid of him out of the locker room. You know, look at Vander Kane, right? Like the guy did have problems where he went. Similar story with Kane, but the guy produces. Now Edmonton's pretty happy with him. So it's like it's a big thing for a guy to produce, even if he doesn't fit. Like it's huge, you know. Kevin Hayes, if he didn't have such a shitty second half of the season, he probably would have been easier to trade too. And
yeah, they
his
would have got a lot
contract
more
made
value.
it hard, right? But it's like you look at like again, he's a 40, 50
What
point
they
player.
trade him for, like a sixth rounder or
Yeah,
something.
and ate half his
Like,
cap for 3
yeah,
years.
exactly.
Yeah. Because he is a 40, 50 point player. He's not an all-star. That all came in the beginning of the year and because of the unfortunate situation with his brother. So I guess two things to talk about quickly here. I don't think we have to say too much about it, but Atkinson was benched again. Again, I'm still in the camp of this is a season back. Couturier is taking a step back. Atkinson is taking a step back, and he's nowhere near as good as Couturier. So get Gurionov getting his ice time. I'm cool with it. I don't expect Atkinson to be benched for long periods of time, but the guy does need to find his game again, whether it be end of this year, but I'm hoping that it'll be next season. I do expect more from him. And then Yinning was sent back down to the Phantoms, kind of,
Yeah.
I think, giving Adder that nice validation that, hey, you don't have to worry about like being benched for Yinning. Um, I don't know what that means as far as having players available, because I think it is a little weird that they don't have seven defensemen
Yeah.
healthy at this point. So maybe Nick Sealer is coming along. I
It's
don't know.
possible. I think for Yenning, maybe the factor of setting him down is obviously, I mean, he gets to play for the Phantoms, and you're saving, I mean, some money on the cap as well.
Yeah,
But they will be home against Toronto coming up here.
if they need
So,
him,
I
they
mean,
can call him.
yeah, they can
So
call him back up. And then just for Atkinson, I don't think it's really a surprise. He's literally has 0 points in his last 15 games, and the team's struggling to score, right? So
yeah,
that's pretty much speaks to why he got scratched. He's not producing.
he's not
They
playing
think
well.
yeah, he's not playing well. They think Gurionov has a better chance of probably scoring a goal here or there, which I would agree with at this point.
Yeah,
He looks faster out there. I just think, like you said, Yariv, it's just a matter of Atkinson. I mean, to me, he looks worn down at this point of the
yeah,
season, and it makes sense, right? Like it's been a lot of games. He missed all of last year. We'll see where it goes. We'll see if this is kind of the new Atkinson going into next season. But I think maybe, a full off season once again of training and kind of using this season to kind of understand, okay, this is what the rigors of an NHL season is like for my body at this age. Maybe that kind of helps him at least looking like a more impactful and a player that can kind of contribute on a more regular basis going into next season. But it's
Yeah.
definitely not encouraging the way he's been playing.
No, it's not. But, we got no choice anyway. They're not going to be able to move that contract again. Going back to what we were
Yeah.
saying, can't move that contract when the guy hasn't put up 15 points or hasn't put up points in the past 15 games. Like nobody's going to take his, even at 50% retained, people are
Yeah.
just not going to want to spend money on an X factor like that or spend
You'd rather have
resources
an
or any.
AHL guy that called up that could do the same thing, maybe.
Right.
Like,
So the Flyers are incentivized here to you know, help him get back to some kind of formidable game so you can trade him next year at the trade deadline for money retained, even if it's just for a fourth round pick or whatever it would be.
yeah.
You're better. You really want him to kind of rehab his game. Hopefully, I doubt he's going to retire early. So, especially with like over $5 million left
Yeah. Why
owed
leave
him.
that on the
Yeah,
table, right?
absolutely. So just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe. Again, follow us on iTunes and Spotify, and give us a rating there. All that is incredibly helpful. So we'll do a couple quick updates here. So this is an update from Kevin Kurz from The Athletic. He had an update about, I'll let you read the tweet exactly, but he has an update on Risto and Drysdale that they are progressing. So none of us really know exactly what's going to happen with them. I'm very much hoping that they can come back. I think the combination of those two and Sealer would help boost this team into a guaranteed playoff spot. They have a really tough schedule now, but their schedule eases up considerably in the final stretch. So maybe they can go on like some kind of sustained winning streak at the end there and ride that into the playoffs. The best way to go into the playoffs in a winning streak as it is,
Yep.
with your confidence high. So I don't know. Hoping to hear more. Maybe we'll hear more next week.
Yeah, I mean the Flyers will have some practices obviously coming up, so maybe once we get some availabilities from John Tortorella and the staff, we'll get some more concrete updates. But the exact tweet from Kevin Kurz of the Athletic is Jamie Drysdale and Rasmus Ristolainen are both improving, but Flyers won't know if they'll be able to play if and until they get back on the ice for practice. Per source, I realize it's not much of an update other than to say things are still pretty much status quo. So it's true, right? Like there's not really any concrete information as to when or what the timeline is, but at least that's a bit of positive news that there is some improvement. And I guess it's just a wait and see, right? Once these guys get back on the ice, if and when they can return and when a concrete timeline's kind of put into place. But I think that would be the best case scenario, right? Yariv, like maybe not over this next 7 game stretch here, but maybe the final 10 games you have one or both of either Drysdale or Ristolainen return, and that can really kind of help the Flyers nail down that either third in the Metro or one of the wild card positions here.
Yeah, yeah. It's such a shame that we lost Drysdale and Risto and Sealer. It's just like and
And you
trading
trade
Walker.
Walker.
It just we had such a solid defense, and now that's all
It's
been rattled.
crazy. It's crazy the I guess switch of it all, right? Just because earlier in the season the Flyers were having trouble getting all these guys into the lineup on a nightly basis, and now I mean they would really like to have these guys
Yeah,
back
we had
and
8
would be
defensemen at
playing
one point.
would probably be playing like top 4 roles, Ristolainen and Drysdale, if they were in the lineup. So
Yeah, yeah. We need Drysdale for the breakout passes immensely. We don't have enough defensemen who are good at that, so big losses there. And his Kevin Kerr's other update is centering around Ryan Johansson. I think we mentioned this last time, or at least in the trade deadline video we did, that apparently Ryan Johansson has an injury. We don't know exactly how that's being dealt with. He's being evaluated. Is he going to Ben Simmons his way through this? Who knows?
yeah.
But he obviously will not be playing for the Flyers. If he ends up playing for the Phantoms, I'll be surprised. And it looks like he's probably going to try to sit out the rest of the season, and the Flyers probably will work desperately to move him. The other thing is that the fact that he shares a an agent with Cutter Gauthier. Look, I don't think Briere is the type of guy to do spiteful moves, but I will say if you want to get back at that agent,
This is a way to do it.
this
Yeah,
is
to make
definitely a way
make
to do
things
it
hard for one of his players. Yeah, so the
that you
exact
have complete leverage
um
over.
The exact tweet from Kevin Kurz with the Athletic on Johansson. This was today. So yeah, there was rumors he was injured. So this is kind of a confirmation of that. Ryan Johansson flew into Philly earlier this week. He told the Flyers he has a hip injury, so he's getting some images done and an exam from Phantom's doctors. Team is unsure of next steps till they figure out what's going on with the injury. This is one thing that's concerning is if he is injured, the Flyers won't have the option to buy him out if they choose to go that route. You cannot buy out an injured player, so they will be stuck with the contract. That's something to keep an eye on. Obviously, though, the Flyers didn't know this ahead of time, or it's strange that this wasn't disclosed in the trade. But maybe the Flyers just didn't care. It seems to me that Johansson, like I said, is the caveat to getting your first round pick. And for the Flyers, that's all that mattered. They're like, hey, we have to take this guy for 1 year. We don't really care. We know we're not going to play him anyway, based on kind of his just maybe how he has been in locker rooms in the past. It just seems they don't want him around, and that's fine for the Flyers as long as we get our first round pick. We'll deal with whatever repercussions there is with Johansson. But it seems like they could not care less to see him play at all, whether it's for the Phantoms or for the Flyers.
Yeah,
That's my opinion on it.
yeah, absolutely. Um, So our next update is on Alexei Kolosov, the Belarusian goaltender. He has been eliminated from the playoffs, and his season is over. So the fact that he's has an ELC with the Flyers, he's been loaned out for the first year of that ELC, has 2 years remaining beyond this season. I think what we were saying, maybe it was like a month ago already, that he probably will come over. I think that's still going to be the case. The Phantoms have a spot for him right now. I don't think the Flyers are that interested in playing Gahagan and Peterson in a development role. And I think they'd love to get Kolosov over here to play some games. So he is also an X factor too. And again, I don't think Sandstrom deserves this because I think he played well in the showings that he's had, even against Tampa Bay. I don't think he necessarily was the issue in that game in any way. Um, but it would be nice to get Kolosov playing here because maybe he might. I don't think they're going to jump to him being a backup next year, but he might get some NHL time because he's been playing against men
If he
for a
looks really
while
good,
and
you
he's
never know.
highly talented and we don't know what's going on with Carter Hart. So there is a desperate need here for another guy who can take Erson's spot essentially as that next man up. So hoping that we get Kolosov over here because the guy's got a really high pedigree and is on a similar path to other great Russian goaltenders that are in the NHL today.
Yeah, so I believe for Kolosov, his team in the KHL, which is Dynamo Minsk, they lost in a 6 game series, and he was a crucial factor in taking the games or taking the series even to 6 games. They actually won the 5th game in overtime, and he stopped 43 of 44 shots for a 977 save percentage.
Let's
So
go.
yeah, he was playing really well. That those stats, those are courtesy of Appleyard. So yeah, like Kolosov once again. I mean, he played a really good season this year in the KHL. He played really well in the playoffs. So we'll see if he ends up coming over. It's interesting because usually guys might be banged up after a season. They might want some rest. So I don't know if the Flyers are gonna, push the envelope on him coming over. But maybe Kolosov wants to come over, or thinks that would be best for his development. So we'll kind of see how it goes because I know obviously another player coming over from another country, specifically Russia in this case too. There's probably going to be things to be sorted out like with travel, just like travel documents and working visas and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So that'll play a factor. And then he might have maybe the final 10, 12 games or something like that to play in the AHL. But for him, just being a goalie that's never really played on the North American ice surface, I think it's really beneficial if he did come over because um, everybody talks about how for players, like skaters, defensemen, forwards, it can be a big transition, to change from the international ice to the North American ice. For goalies, it is even more of an adjustment, right? Like
The angles
all of
alone.
all of your angles change. So
Yeah.
to get accustomed to that and the way you play your game at the North American ice versus the international level, it's a huge adjustment. So to get him started on that and kind of getting familiarized with those angles and just how he kind of has to play certain shots differently in North America versus playing, in the KHL. I think that would be a real benefit to his development and probably help him going into next season and probably help him start the season off more adequately versus maybe you see him struggle a bit, right? If he doesn't come over to end here and he only really has a training camp to work with
Yeah.
going into next season. So I think,
Plus,
yeah, getting
plus
him
we're
to come over is a really good thing, obviously, for him.
yeah, and we're short another goal. We're short a goaltender that can play at the next level,
Yeah.
right? And even if he we still be fourth on the depth chart just by seniority, just to know that we have him,
You
and
never know what's going to happen.
yeah, you
So,
never know what's going to happen with injuries. So like the Phantoms would need him considerably too. Though Nolan Meyer has done a good job stepping up from the ECHL when he's had to. I just think the Flyers would much rather have a guy like Kolosov in there who,
yeah.
something happen, God forbid something happens to Erson, but something happens to Sandstrom, you call Peterson back up. You need Kolosov down there. Something happens to both of them. You know,
Then you're really screwed, but at least you
yeah,
have another goalie you can rely on.
right. Like I'd rather have Kolosov than get Gahagan gets a contract for the remainder of the year. I don't think anything's that going to happen, but you never know. The whole Carter Hart thing was a big X factor here, and we just need the goalies. We need the goalies in the system. It's important.
Yeah.
And the last piece we have, and this is just a quick prospect update, but I thought it was pretty cool. Alex Bump has been named to the NCAA All Rookie Team, um, which I think, I'm sorry, the NCHC, but college hockey. And he's having a hell of a season. Again, he's been playing for Western Michigan University. He's got 29 points in 34 games. That's 11 goals, 18 assists. He's a +8. And I did look up his teammates. He's 20 years old. Of the top 5 point producers, he is the youngest on his team. I think that's also a really good sign. And just, it's exactly what we wanted. I'm hoping he gets an ELC soon, and he's a guy, he'll be 21 next year. Let's actually see when he turns 21. He turns 21 in November. So early next season, he'll already be 21. I would suspect the Flyers, after what's happened of late with, Cutter Gauthier, will probably try to get him locked up, try to get him over here playing for the Phantoms next year. He's a guy who could be one of those late round steals, a fifth round pick, being an NHL caliber player. He's definitely on track for that right now, and he has offensive upside. I think he maybe tops out as a middle six forward at the highest, maybe third line player, but even a third line player with his skill set, I think would be really nice, especially to find in the fifth round. So let's hope that we get some updates on Alex Bump. What do you think?
Yeah, for Bump, I mean, this is his first year in the NCHC, first year with college hockey. So it's obviously good to see him assimilating well, right? Like he's got 29 points in 34 games, 11 goals, 18 assists, essentially in his first taste of college hockey. So that's always a great sign, right? Versus seeing him kind of struggle a bit. And just even NCHC scoring leaders like wide, he's pretty up there for a rookie. Like he's 18th in total NCHC scoring in his rookie season. In that playing for Western Michigan. So obviously great to see. And just from the bit I've seen of him, just in like development camps, rookie camps, looks like a guy who has a really nice shot, right?
Yep.
And I mean to draft a guy like him in the fifth round who looks like he has some offensive upside and might be able to be that type of third line, winger that could, chip some goal scoring in for you. That's always a great asset to have. So for the Flyers, development seems like it's going well for Bump, which is a good sign. And it's funny, as I was searching those stats up, I saw an article from Sports Illustrated saying fan intensely gives middle finger to Alex Bump after he scores. So I'll have to look into that. But
He'll
I
fit
thought
right in.
that
He'll
was,
fit. He'll fit right in here then.
yeah, I thought that was really funny so might as well mention it, but
Yeah,
interesting.
absolutely. Owen McClellan's actually having a really good season in NCAA too.
Flyers
Yep.
are finding some value, it looks like, with some of their later round picks. Like I have to give credit where it's due to Brent Flair because even and we said this on many episodes, right? Like even in the past, like Flair, his draft track record back in Minnesota, a lot of guys he drafted have turned into NHL players, and it's kind of looking like the same thing here,
He's
where
been doing. He's been doing pretty well. He saved Chuck Fletcher, in
I would
my
agree.
opinion, in a
Yeah.
lot of ways. His reputation. All right, let's wrap it up here. We have to do a shorter episode today just because we have a time restriction. Vasily, anything you want to leave our audience with?
No, just, we're really happy to see everybody supporting the podcast, supporting Flyers Nitty Gritty. So just keep an eye out, for episodes coming out. It'll be weekly. Keep an eye out for articles on Flyers Nitty Gritty from myself and, all our other writers as well. Like there's always tons of new content coming out. But yeah, I'll continue to have articles up on the website as we move through the stretch drive of the season here and kind of gear up towards the playoffs. But yeah, exciting times for the Flyers.
Absolutely. Definitely is. Can't wait. Can't wait for the playoffs. Okay, just want to remind everybody to please like, subscribe, share our stuff out if you can. Follow us on iTunes and Spotify. Give us a rating there as well. All of that is tremendously helpful. Also, follow us on social media outlets like Twitter and Instagram and whatnot. Again, we're on there. Vasily's doing a great job tweeting. He's also tweeting from our account a lot now as well, which has been tremendously helpful. So make sure you support us there because that all of that stuff is just keeps us going. And shout out again to our sponsor, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim's, and also Public Summit Adjusters at 215-752-0560. All right, this was another good episode. We got some big games coming up. Yeah, I'm excited. I love meaningful hockey, and it's like I said, it's awesome to be part of the conversation. All right, thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening. We love you, and remember, always stay